Always buy a home that is attractive from the street and has a good floor plan, a good basic floor plan. So you can fix stuff like this, but if a house is ugly at its bones, if it's got ugly bones, you got an ugly house. And you can't change the carpet enough. It's still ugly after you change the carpet. You know what I'm saying? And so if it's got ugly bones, you got to stay away from it, or you got to buy it so cheap you can completely tear the thing down just about and start again. My very first house I bought had ugly bones. It was a really dumb idea, but it was a good deal, I thought, until I tried to sell it, because it had ugly bones. In Tennessee, sometimes when we're building a neighborhood, we'll cut a road through the side of a mountain. And the houses above the road are kind of perched up there, and the ones below the road are kind of down below there. We've got a joke in the business we call in that area. We say the ones down below the road are oil pan houses, because you can stand on the front porch and look at the oil pans of the cars as they drive by. That's about the elevation. Well, we bought the one up the hill, and the idiot that built this thing up on the hill decided to build it really tall up on the hill. And so it kind of just stuck up there, ugly in the air. Bad elevation, a bad idea. And had this driveway that went straight down like this to the street. Just straight down. You had to turn the car to keep from dragging stuff when you got to the bottom. You know what I'm saying? I came in after an ice storm one night. My parents were over visiting with my wife, and this idiot driving beside me in an ice storm had gone into a spin and hit my car on every side. He just went all the way around it. And so I'm not in a good mood already when I get home, and ice is about this thick all over everything. You can't walk on anything. And so I'm going, there's no way you walk up this driveway. And so I walk up the other side of the driveway in the neighbor's yard, and I'm trying to cut across the top of the driveway to get to the front porch, and I fell. Well, I'm breakdancing like a Ninja Turtle all the way to the street. You know. Screaming and saying things I can't say in church. You know what I'm saying? My mother looks out the window and says, somebody's playing on your driveway, honey. Don't buy a house with ugly bones. You can't fix that. I ended up giving that house away just about. Don't buy a house with ugly bones.
Have you seen those big apartment complexes with a nice swimming pool, health club, or jacuzzi and spas? Well, those little extras will cost you more in rent. If you're looking to find cheap rent, you won't find it there. You'll have to look in the classified ads for an apartment to rent over someone's garage. When you're apartment hunting, make sure to ask about the hidden expenses. How much extra will it be if I have a pet? Is there a trash service, or is that extra? Does the apartment come with a washer or dryer? Last, make sure you understand the lease before you sign. You know, that paper you sign that says you'll pay the rent on time and stay there for at least a year. Is the rent listed correctly, and is the deposit on there? What happens if you break the lease? Remember, don't buy anything you don't understand, and that rule also applies with signing papers. If you don't understand all the terms or you still have questions, do not sign, especially do not give them a deposit.
Have the home inspected mechanically and structurally by a certified home inspector. When you're getting an appraisal, remember that an appraisal is an opinion of value. Some appraisers understand that they are to render an opinion. Others think they're God. And they get this little ego thing going in the process. Had an appraiser one time. I had the house sold for $262,000 to $500. And he had the contract, so he knew what the deal was at. That was part of the package we gave them. Gave him comparable sales to show that it was worth that. But this guy had a little thing going about his power, a little Barney Fife action. Turns in the appraisal, not at $262,500, but at $262,250. Now, you don't know within $250 what a house is worth. There is no such thing. I've done hundreds of appraisals. That's just ego. So we put him on the list to do not call ever again. Appraiser list, right? Do not buy trailers or mobile homes. Do not buy timeshares. Why? These two things, the value disappears on them. Trailers go down in value. Mobile homes go down in value like a rock. They go down in value faster than a car. Financially, it's a car you sleep in. Don't buy them. Timeshares go down in value 1,000% to zero the instant you buy them because no one will buy it. There is no secondary market for timeshares. You can't give the stupid things away. And when you get caught up in buying a timeshare, you're going to own it the rest of your life. You're hung there. It is not an investment. You're better off take your vacation money, go on vacation. Now, when it comes to mortgages, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to remember to hate debt. That's the first thing. We remember the borrower slave to the lender. We don't want to do debt at all. And so I would like for you to think about something really wild with mortgages. I want you to consider maybe using the 100% down plan. Pay cash, in other words. Don't buy it unless you just write a check. Oh, that's just not realistic. You can't do that. Really? Really? I'll tell you. I've run into it. I can tell you this. It's weird, but normal's broke. Had a guy call me from Cleveland on my radio show. He said, Dave, I grew up with my granddad. My granddad was old school, and he told me, if you ever borrow money, I'm going to kill you. And he said, that's how I was raised. I didn't think borrowing money was an option at all. He said, I was 23 years old, and I had a really good job. And I always have to clarify on the radio because I don't know what they mean. I said, what's a really good job? He said, I was making $50,000 a year. That's a really good job at 23 years old. And he said, I married this young lady that was a teacher, and she was making $30,000 a year, so we had a household income of $80,000 a year. We moved into a garage studio apartment over the top of this rich old lady's garage. I kept her gutters cleaned and her yard cut, and we paid almost no rent because the rent was only $250 anyway, while we're making $80,000 a year. We drove my old car, paid off her old car. We lived while we're making $80 on $30 and banked $50. We banked $50 while living on $30 and making $80. We did that for 4 years. That's $200,000 for those of you that aren't quick. 4 times 50. He said, I was 3 years old when I started this. When I turned 27, I wrote a check and purchased a $150,000 home, handed my young bride a check for $50,000 to furnish it with, and we paid cash. Now, how set up do you think this guy is? You think he's going to be wealthy? Well, I thought I'd run some numbers for the fun of it. Let's say instead he'd taken out a $150,000 mortgage, and he'd kept a mortgage throughout his life. $150,000 mortgage at 15% at 6% is $1,265.79. If you pay $1,265.79 from age 29, which is just after he closed on the house, until age 69, throughout his working lifetime, if he just paid himself a house payment into a decent mutual fund that we learned about in the lessons of Mice and Mutual Funds, that house payment will become just under $15 million. Now, how dumb was this guy? But I said, did people make fun of you? He goes, oh, yeah. He said, my mother-in-law was the worst. She came over 2 or 3 times and tried to do an intervention. She said we needed counseling, that I was abusing her daughter. And I abused her by writing her a $50,000 check to furnish a paid-for house with, and set her up to completely change his family tree. Why? Because his grandfather put a different paradigm in his head about mortgages that, oh, well, you can get a house, you just have to save up and pay for it. People don't think that way. Maybe you're not going to do the 100% down plan, but maybe you get gazelle intense and you get out of debt and you start piling up some cash. Maybe you put 50% down. And maybe you put it on a 15-year, but maybe you pay it off in 6. And you just think different than your neighbors. You think different than broke people, like I'm always going to have a mortgage instead of I'm always going to have a car payment. Now, where do we save up to buy our first home in the baby steps? We recommend baby step 3B. Baby step 3 is 3 to 6 months. So I want you to have your emergency fund in place, and I want you to be sure that you have the debt paid off. You're debt-free with the emergency fund in place, and then you save for your down payment or your 100% down payment plan. That's where you do that. 15 million reasons to do it. Think about it. Think about it. And by the way, paid-for homes aren't that unusual. Realtors tell us that 11% of second home buyers pay cash. And literally, nationally, the Census Bureau says that 35%, that's 1/3 of Americans' homes are paid for. But we don't think about it that way. The other 2/3 are running around acting like, oh, you're stupid if you pay off your house and those kinds of things, right? Now, by the way, there's nothing wrong with renting. There's nothing wrong with renting for a little while. If you're renting for a little while like he did, when he rented that $250 place, he was going somewhere with renting. Now, I don't want renting to be a way of life, but renting can demonstrate a little bit of patience and a little bit of wisdom if it's part of your plan to get yourself out of debt, to have that emergency fund in place, and then buy at the proper way and in the proper time.
Buying a home is a great idea. Real estate and owning your own home ownership can be a huge blessing. But if you want to turn that dream into a nightmare, buy a home when you're broke. You shouldn't buy a home when you're broke. You will cause all kinds of problems. Always have your emergency fund in place, always be debt-free, and always be putting down a good down payment. Otherwise, you're just squeaking in and acting like nothing's going to happen. And I got to tell you, Murphy, if it can go wrong, it will move in your spare bedroom, and he'll bring his 3 cousins, broke, desperate, and stupid.
When you do get ready to buy, I don't recommend debt. I don't like debt. I save up and pay for things. I will never borrow money for anything again, period, under any circumstances. You don't have anything I want bad enough to go into debt for it. But if you're going to buy, I'm not going to yell at you on this one kind of debt. Everything else I'll yell at you. So get a payment of no more than 25% of your take-home pay on a 15-year fixed-rate loan with at least 10% down. Let's look at a 15-year mortgage versus a 30 for an example. This is interesting stuff. If you take a $225,000 mortgage on a 15-year basis, the payment would be $1,899. If you did it on a 30-year basis, it'd be $1,349. The difference on that is $550. But let's visit Joe and Susie in this example 10 years later. After 10 years, the $225,000 loan on a 15-year basis is paid down to $98,000. After paying on it for 10 years, the 30-year $225,000 loan is paid down only to $188,292. The bottom line is this: you would have paid almost $162,000 in on this 30-year mortgage, but only paid down on the loan by $36,708.
It's hard getting started when you're young, and there's so many expenses. Almost makes you want to keep living at home. That's why it's vital that you start saving right now. Watch this next piece again and see how much you can save by taking out a 15 instead of a 30-year mortgage.